Good evening, and surprise, it's me, John. Welcome to Telling Tales, where we play dark, atmospheric role playing games and stream them for your enjoyment. Usually, that's not quite what we're doing tonight. Tonight, we are having a small, friendly, but well structured discussion about our thoughts on Simmeroom, a fantasy role playing game from Free League, which is kind of, it was the first series we started here on Telling Tales. Before we get into that, just a brief amount of promo that I just have to get through for reasons. You're going to be watching this video on either our Twitch or our YouTube, depending on when you're watching it. If you're enjoying it, maybe check out the other platform and give us a follow or subscribe, because we like seeing numbers going up, and they have slightly different things, and if you like one, you'll hopefully like the other. If you look down in the description below, we have all of our social media links. There is Twitter, Instagram, and Facebook, which will let you stay up to date on all of the Telling Tales news and announcements and all the other things. If you want to be slightly more sociable than that, then there is also a link for our Discord, where you can come and chat about whatever shiny role-playing thing we're talking about this week. And if you want to support us, there is also a link to our Patreon, which has such rewards as extra access to on our Discord, behind-the-scenes character creation videos, and exclusive role-playing sessions with our resident games master, Matt. If you are wondering why you should be supporting us, if you're maybe new to the channel and you just randomly stumbled across this, then please check out any of our streams. As said, we stream Simmeroom every Wednesday at 8 o'clock GMT. It's, again, dark fantasy role-playing series. If that's maybe not your thing, then we have a Vampire the Masquerade 5th edition stream, also at 8 o'clock GMT every Tuesday. Our chronicle is called London Ascendant. We're currently taking a brief pause to play through some, or maybe all, of Fall of London by Modiphius Entertainment. And if you want to get on a brand new series right from the beginning, then we've just this week started a Call of Cthulhu anthology series, first installment of which is called Darkwood. It's set in rural Scotland in the 1920s. If long-running series aren't your things, then we also run one-shot role-playing streams on the first Saturday of every month. Check out our YouTube for the VODs of our Free League Alien RPG and our Troika games, and join us on Saturday the 3rd of April. Yes, 3rd of April for Morkborg, which has been described as the doom metal album, the role-playing game. We're very much looking forward to it. And I think that is everything. Chat, shout at me if I am missing anything. Yes, Saturday streams, 3 o'clock GMT. Vital information. Almost forgot that. Right. That's all the promo. On to today. Today, I will introduce our players. We have players. They usually have players. We have Chris.
Hello.
We have Mike. We have Sam. And we have Elle.
Yeah, that's the spirit.
Fantastic. So, let's start off with, I guess, our credentials. What right do we have to be talking about role-playing games? Let's start with Mike. What are your role-playing credentials?
So I was part of a campaign that Matt, our resident games master, ran about 15 years ago. That was a White Wolf system called Exalted, and I think that we did that for about 2 years. And I've done a small amount of other role-playing, but really not much, and that was also 15 years ago. So this is like my return to role-playing, basically.
Sam?
I take some issue with the question. I think everyone has a right to talk about role-playing systems. John, how dare you?
It's a very good point. Very good point.
But no, I've been role-playing mostly with John and Matt, and a few others in the group for, I guess, 7 or 8 years. I can't quite remember. We have a very long vampire campaign, and then we've done a lot of other smaller stuff in between until now with Simbrew.
Elle?
Yeah, I role play on and off because I have the attention span of something with not a very large attention span. But I have been doing it on and off, usually with Matt, John, and co. Occasionally with other GMs. Occasionally, I attempt to GM my own things. It usually ends.
All things do.
As all things do. But yeah, I've been, role playing on and off for a good, I'd say, about 4 or 5 years now. So I probably have, a right to talk about it, maybe, perhaps.
Chris?
Yeah, I started role playing back in Belfast in the late 90s. I have been through an awful lot of systems, and then paused for 20 odd years, and just restarted again when Matt called me up with this harebrained scheme to do some live role play streams, and it's been really good fun.
Oh,
I hope you're okay, Elle.
I'm fine. Yeah, just in case. So I had a hiccup, and I'm somewhere where my laptop isn't. So I'm on my phone today. Hence, whatever the hell just happened there. It fell.
fantastic. The dedication that you go through to be here.
I caught it though.
Yeah,
So
Impressive.
clearly.
Very impressive.
We just had a note from the chat that apparently Elle's first RP was 9 years ago.
Wow.
yeah, so yeah, obviously, it was because that was how I first met Matt. But I kind of took a very long, very, very long break in between then and when I consider myself to have truly started role playing, because we don't talk about Gun. We just don't talk about him.
We don't talk about Gun.
We don't talk about him.
And yeah, I think my credentials are mostly the same as Sam's. I think I started role playing slightly before you because a school friend of mine randomly called me up and was like, "Do you want to play D&D with me in another city?" And I was like, "Fine." But it was sort of with Matt and Sam and that group that I really started having a regular group to go to.
Yeah.
So yeah, and you may notice everyone else has their character names on their nameplates. I don't play in Simbroom, but I do lurk in the background and read all the rules because I'm the stream manager / rules gremlin. So these guys have more experience with Simbroom as it goes to actually playing, but I'm the one who usually has to read through the rule books when they ask me hard questions.
Sure.
So let's start with our first overarching topic of the mechanics. First up, first impressions versus today's feelings. Would anyone in particular like to start?
So how long? I meant to look this up before we started. I think it's not quite a year since the first episode. And I remember.
I think it's only been about 7 months. I think this is September or October last year, I believe.
Time flies, but
I want to say September.
I was obviously swatting up on the rules and reading through all of the permitted sections of the rulebook beforehand, and I really was struck by how elegant everything looked. Like it's a very rules light system. That it's not like D&D 3.5, where you've got a whole book full of tables and anything like that. So it did strike me as something that was very simple and had a couple of kind of archetypal rules that covered all situations. I think as we've been playing the game, we've found some of the knobbly bits around the edges and bits where rules might not interact as well. And so my feeling of how things are at the minute for me is that the game plays nice, except in certain circumstances where it does either grind a little bit or kind of, it's difficult to get a straight answer from the rule book under certain circumstances. I think magic being the main one.
I think you go, Mike. Oh.
I was just going to say that the simplicity of it is like hugely appealing to me. Like, and it was right at the start hugely appealing to me, and I really appreciate it now. I think what really like has struck me as the weeks and months have gone by is that like it just means that we can pack more story and more actual role playing into our sessions, and there's less time kind of like where we're just pausing to have a look at a PDF and check through tables and rules and stuff like that. And you're right, we have to do that sometimes because it's not perfect, but generally speaking, it just means that we can get on with doing what we're here to do, and I really like that about it.
Yeah, I do think like it's very simple, and I like perhaps it does sometimes sacrifice some of the edge cases becoming more confusing because the rest of it is so simple. But I do also think there's perhaps some element of the things we get tripped up on or that don't seem that clear in the rules might also be sometimes we feel like due to translation problems in the books, like where something hasn't been properly translated or fully translated. But I think I really like the system. I really like how streamlined it is. I think it's very interesting playing with I think I like playing with no GM roles. Just feels like you get to do more roles, and you also have like a bit more kind of understanding of what's going on. You're not like fighting something, and you don't really know like if it's gonna just like, you know, how hard it is to hit or how likely it is to hit you. You have some kind of more understanding of what's going on. I think I enjoy that part of it as well. So.
I wish I had more to contribute, but I don't think my feelings towards the rule system ever changed from start to finish. That is to say that I didn't particularly have any. I know it sounds odd, but I kind of, for me, the systems that I'm most familiar with are D&D 5e, the Mutant Year Zero kind of system, and now Symbaroum. I mean, I'll say that I enjoy the system enough that I now want to run my own. And I went out and bought a bunch of the rulebooks and stuff for it. But yeah, kind of mechanically, I don't ever particularly, unless something is very complex, it doesn't stand out to me because it's just like, I mean, the one thing I will say is that, I mean, I liked that because of its simplicity as it went on, I almost didn't have to look at my character sheet as much because I just kind of, you're making the same rolls and your stats don't really increase or decrease unless you're me. And so like, it meant that like, I pretty much just kind of knew everything off the top of my head. So I did like that quite a lot because it like added to the role play of it because it felt like I was being able to kind of get into character more because I wasn't having to like constantly like look at my character sheet. But yeah, I just didn't. It's just like, it's an odd one for me. I'm like, yeah, that was a system. Cool. And that's about as far as my thoughts go.
Go on, Mike.
I do remember thinking for like the first few weeks that like I wish the kind of the system was inverted and you had to roll above a certain number because I consistently rolled between 15 and 20 for like the first few sessions. we sort of cemented Anton as like the joke character in our story anyway. But no,
You do
I
have
don't.
to get past that, don't you? Because, like, for example, if you are, as most people are nowadays, just generic like D&D players, you do have to get past that. Yes, I rolled a 20, because you're like, oh god.
No.
Yeah. You definitely get used to it after a little bit. Like, I
Yeah.
agree with Mike. Like the first few sessions, you're just sometimes wishing it was backwards, but I think eventually you get used to like a 1 being really good and being happy with 1s. Probably go back to other systems and start getting all confused.
Yes, I rolled a 1. Oh wait.
It does kind of undo some of that dice trauma we've all developed over the years, I think.
Yeah. I wonder if like the people I know who just consistently roll really low in other systems where it's bad would just be like godlike at Symbaroum and kill everything in 1 hit.
No, I think that like it's just their sheer bad luck. So if they played Symbaroum, they'd suddenly be getting natural 20s.
Yeah,
like,
true.
100%. That is what would happen.
There's a good point raised in chat that the bonuses and penalties to adjust your target number took some work.
Yeah.
Yeah, up is down and down is up.
So the plus is good, or is it bad? And then
yeah.
I think you could say it either way, but you just need a consistent way of saying it. Like, I think that's all it took. Like once we were all on board with what way we were going to use to describe like the good and bad modifiers, I think we all got the hang of it. But it's definitely another thing that you have to get used to a little bit.
Absolutely.
So is the general feeling more or less simple to learn with a few crunchy bits at the edges?
Yeah,
I'd say so. I very much enjoy the Symbaroum system now that I'm used to it. I mean, not that I play it anymore, but when I did, I really enjoyed it.
Good. Let's talk about those crunchy bits for a bit. Rough around the edges. What are the particular sticking points that we found?
I had a little in the internal kind of notes for this. I had a little subtitle for these sections, and the subtitle for this one is FNA is two-handed flesh blender, because I think FNA actually from starting stats created the most brutal combat character imaginable, and was
which I am happy to talk about, because obviously. When like I'm not like a min-maxy sort of person when I role play. So when I was creating FNA, I had this idea of essentially the woman from Horizon Zero Dawn was kind of in my head, and I was like, she's going to be just like a warrior, kind of like tanky, and so I picked. Without reading too much into it, I picked the skills that I thought would like assist. I was like, okay, cool. That gives me, because I'd not really played that much of a session. I didn't know how much this would absolutely wreck the game's balance. I was like, okay, this seems good. This seems good. This seems good. And then within the first kind of like 3 sessions, I noticed that kind of combat was actually becoming quite dull, because the whole point of Symbaroum is that it's meant to be this like anything could kill you at any moment sort of thing. And here we have FNA, who I think Matt has pointed out during streams like multiple times that FNA, the character build that I took, coincidentally just happens to be one of the most broken, like pretty much the most broken in terms of strength, because if anyone's ever actually tuned into an episode of Symbaroum, like I think Matt said at one point, basically like take it as just like this is a random number, but say like most enemies in the game have maybe kind of like a max of like 20 HP, and I can potentially do that in like 1 hit.
Yeah.
And it just became, combat almost became not fun for me because of that, because I could literally just zone out through everyone else's turn and then it'd just come back around to me and it'd be like, right, FNA, time to do your thing. And I'd be like, cool, here's my like 27,000 dice, Because the thing is as well, the skill that I bought, the Adept Berserker, where it then negates a D4's worth of damage, almost negates the point of the Berserker thing, because Berserker is obviously you get an extra dice of damage, but to offset that, your defense is now low as all heck.
And then with second ability, it's like that doesn't matter.
Yeah. It's like you just end up with this character that if like she hadn't like died through spoilers, I guess. Natural circumstances, like would she have been able to die?
Yeah, and I think I've read a few things, one of the criticisms that's leveled at the character creation is that if you're going for a standard build, then you will probably end up with the same character as someone else who's gone through that standard build. So you went for a tanky Berserker, and FNA is probably functionally not actually that different from any other tanky Berserker, because that's what you pick, which makes sense. But
I think another thing we should round on with regards to talking about the lumpy bits is I'd love to hear from you, Mike, regarding your adventures with the rather punitive, I feel, spellcasting system. I get the feeling they really don't want magic playing as big a role in Symbaroum as it's allowed to play in things like D&D and even vampire and storyteller style systems.
Yeah, I guess, and part of that is like a thematic thing as well. Like the world is perhaps less magic-y. But you're right, it is a little bit restrictive. And I should point out that I didn't go into this like massively researching it. But for like the character that I play right now, like I'm really penalized if I try to do like two magic-y things in one scene. Like I'm potentially running a risk of like, absolute disaster there for my character, and then like the kind of corruption system can really snowball, and it's really hard to then undo all of that. So yeah, it's like, I don't know, high risk and low reward. Yeah, like it's it's not easy. And if I like if your magic character is restricted to just doing one magic-y thing per combat, then combat becomes a little bit one note. So I think like maybe this is on a reflection for me rather than the system, because I could have perhaps researched it a little bit more. But yeah, I think that I would have done a little bit more reading around that if I was going to do things again. I think I'm jumping the gun a little bit there. I think we're going to talk about that stuff a little bit more later on.
Yeah.
I think it's kind of like your experience and my observing your experience that has kind of put me off like the sorcerers and wizards I have in my What Happens When Steo's Luck Runs Out folder of next characters.
But it's a funny one though, isn't it? Because you need a bit of that in the party. You need like that kind of balance in the party. So like it's useful to have some of that, I guess. But yeah, I can completely understand why you'd be put off the idea of doing it.
I think there are, from what I've seen, there are a few things in like the kind of supplementary rules that we've just started using that help with that a bit. I think maybe they also kind of realized it was a bit harsh, a bit snowballing. I think there's one which like turns your corruption threshold into your actual resolute instead of half of it, which means you don't like hit your corruption threshold and then snowball like quite so often, and you can get a few more things done in a scene. But one of the things that also seems weird to me is that like it seems like there's some like spells and abilities which in other systems you just like cast kind of as a throwaway, like your shield. Like I feel like in D&D you just, anytime there was any kind of fighting about to happen, you'd be like, I cast my shield. And then there's other spells which seem like your Holy Aura is like an AoE heal damage spell, and they both do like the same amount of corruption and they're just as difficult to cast as one another. And it feels like the balance is kind of, in that way, is kind of strange within the magic system. Like those spells don't seem to be things that would cause you the same amount of hassle or like punishment to cast, and yet they're both just treated identically.
Yeah, I would agree with that, and also I think that probably makes things quite difficult for like the GM's point of view as well, because like you don't want someone who can do everything at once. Like you want to create a bit of jeopardy and things like that, and something that's overly powerful and heals people at the same time is a bit like OP maybe if you take it to like the third level anyway of mastery. So yeah.
Okay, let's flip that question somewhat on its head. And what works well? What do we really like about Symbaroum? What does it do that other things don't do as well?
I'm not
I'm going
totally
to throw
sure
my mouse across
why.
the desk.
I'm not totally sure why, but I have the feeling with Symbaroum that it's like an FOV slider in a game. It feels like I'm more focused on a smaller group and a more immediate situation than I am in other games where I have a wider scope, a higher level view, a more kind of, we'll kill all the enemies in this room. In Symbaroum, I'm concerned about the enemy I'm engaged with a lot more. I don't know exactly why, but that definitely is something that makes this feel a lot more different from your normal dungeon crawler TTRPGs, I think.
Yeah.
I agree with that. It does feel a lot more kind of party focused than like big story. Like even meeting like a spider goddess is just like who care about that? Like what's happening at the party sort of thing. And like I guess for me, like something that I think works well is that to kind of a little bit of a counter to my point earlier where I was saying like how combat was like super easy with Ephinaia, there are times like in Symbaroum it can be very unforgiving if you miss or if you like flummox even like one or two rolls and you're in combat, like that's it. Like one of the final battles that I was involved in, obviously there was that I think a few of us made bad rolls, and by the end of it, we were all like about to die.
Yeah.
So it does actually have that kind of like balance in a way. It's like, yeah, you can create your horrendously overpowered character, but equally, like things will mess you up if you don't get the rolls. So I do like that there is very much a sense still of going into like some combats and being like, oh crap, like I could actually die here.
Yeah.
Which is nice. Well, it's not, but it is.
Yeah, it's nice to feel threatened.
It's nice to
be fair.
That really adds, though, doesn't it, to what we're going to talk about next, which is going to be like the theme and the setting and all of that sort of stuff. Because you like
spoiler alert, Mike.
Sorry, guys. They work side by side. The mechanics and the theme really support each other because the mechanics do make you feel vulnerable, and yeah, it does feel like a scary thing when you're walking around Davokar. So yeah, I really appreciate that.
Yeah, I pretty much agree. Like it's exactly what Mike says. It feels like kind of the grittiness of the combat is just perfect for what the setting is, and like I think part of the reason you end up focused so much on your party is because it feels like every time you get in a fight, it becomes or could very quickly become a fight for survival. Like it's not in some other systems you'll be fighting to be like, how can I most brutally destroy these enemies that are like annoying me? And in this is like, oh god, I really need to roll well, or I'm just gonna die in like 2 hits. Like and like you'll see the other players, the other characters also having that same struggle, and you'll be thinking, oh god, I gotta like roll well so I can go and help this other person who's like on 1 HP and about to get attacked by 10 flame servants or whatever it is. And it just like, I don't know, it feels a lot more kind of grounded. Just feels very well suited to the setting. I do think, like, as well, for however broken FNA was, there are still like it still seemed like there were things that Matt could throw at us that kind of balanced it a bit, like things that we couldn't hit properly and things that had like magic mind control stuff, and like there were still things that could be done to make the combat difficult, even if we had a really strong character from early on.
Even just numbers, like if you get overwhelmed by numbers, like with the flame servant people things, like then you're in for a bad time, pal.
Yeah, because like you did loads of damage, but you did loads of damage to one thing a turn. So
yeah,
like if there are a few things hitting you, you are still
taking. I'm still eating that up. Yeah.
Yeah.
Okay. As we were nicely talking about how the mechanics feed into the themes, let's move on to the themes. So, what makes up Symbaroum's Heart, which is a very poetic titled name that Chris came up with? Would you like to expand on that a bit, Chris?
Yeah, I think for me, a nice little subline for that is like the setting, and at least in terms of Davokar and the struggle to survive in the environment we find ourselves in, not just in Davokar but in Ambria as well. That's the challenge and the setting. Like the theme and the setting is very neatly kind of mirrored in how brutal the game can be, despite its simplicity. I think. It's difficult to. I think a lot, and they mentioned this in the actual core book. There's a lot of space in Symbaroum for different settings. In terms of, you can go to Yndaros and have the intrigue of the capital. In Thistlehold, there's this the brutality, and you get a view of the intermingling of cultures and survival on the edge of this forest. And then Davokar itself, there's always this train of deep unknowability going through the forest, which is just, it is inspiringly mysterious. I really do want to learn, discover, uncover more about the what caused this forest to just get so entirely wonky.
Yeah, and it, like, that really adds something to the setting as well, when like nearly all of the NPCs that you meet, they don't know anything about deep Davokar, and certainly don't know too much about light Davokar as well. So like within the world, like it is a mystery, not just to the characters that you end up playing for the most part. So yeah.
And I think there's something, I think in terms of D&D, it feels like one of those 1970s, 1980s sitcoms where like Tiamat walks into the room and I was like, yay, we know him. There's kind of a roster of like well understood systems, and in Symbaroum they are all obfuscated. There's no big bad. You don't really even understand the power structures. You're pretty sure you're not exactly on the side of good, because it doesn't really feel like there is a side of good. It just feels like there's a side of surviving and versus the forest.
I think that's also part of the reason you become like very party focused, because you're not like fighting for the kingdom of Ambria. You're just like, you're interested in your party doing well and surviving and like progressing in whatever way your party has chosen to proceed with what you're doing. Like you're not really, you don't feel like you're caught up too much in some greater force in the setting that's trying to like drive you to do things. You just feel like your party's all alive and they're like, their goal is to survive and make a bit of money with the skills that they have that are mostly fighty and kind of adventure skills. So like you just go and do fighty adventure things because that's what your characters would do in this setting, because it's how they would survive in it.
Yeah, agree with that.
I think one thing I do quite like about Symbaroum, and I think is like an almost core part of it, it may be because we had a priest in our party, but I do like that. I feel like the religion aspect does play a lot more in Symbaroum than any other sort of role-playing system, because obviously, again, with the whole like D&D, to make the is like so kind of vast and sprawling, and there's about like 25,000 different religions in it, whereas like you really get a sense, like obviously in the barbarian clans they've got their different gods and things, but you get a sense of like Prios as being the, like this kind of, there's Prios and then there's the barbarian gods, and
Yeah.
like it, like I don't know, it just kind of felt like it kind of like added something to it, because it meant that, like, because obviously religion is a very controversial kind of subject even in like real life, so to kind of have it so heavily embedded in, like it felt to me anyway that like religion is quite heavily embedded in the heart of Symbaroum, and it was very fun to kind of play and watch, especially when having a priest in your party, when you go into Davokar and you unearth all these horrendous monsters, and then the priest of Prios might come into contact with another god, and it's like,
Whoop.
oh, how do we deal with this?
Yeah.
And it's and then like even like as playing as Ephenair, who was like, Prios, yeah, right, and just being, I just like, I think religion plays a bigger part in it than like other role playing systems, and I actually quite like that, because it adds a like a kind of political religious sort of intrigue to it.
I also love how kind of enigmatic the religion is, because we've already had a number of hints that like Prios is maybe just a man, but is maybe also an older god with a different name, but is maybe also like everything is just shrouded. Like it's, the forest is not just the thing you're moving through. The forest is this kind of ambiguity around even kind of fundamental facts of the existence, and that, I think that really sets it apart from places in D&D where astral planes and like vampire and werewolf, where it's like we all know about the Umbra, we all know about these magical things and how they are aligned, but it's just so enigmatic in Symbaroum, and it's made very clear like players should not read past the certain page in the core book or the advanced player book. It's all kept away from the players, so there is this mystery, this wonderful, alluring, persistent mystery about going through Davokar and going through the whole game world.
Yeah, I think there's also like a really nice balance in the books about like there's so much mystery, as you say, but like there's also enough information and like concrete stuff to get you involved in the world and to feel like you understand your place, and it's all like quite interesting. Even like the religion of Prios, like that's kind of, it's not defined, but like there's enough about it and it makes it interesting, and it gives like the priests and Tom all like some understanding of what their place is, without it being like just telling you everything about the world. And like it just strikes a really nice balance for me. And I think also it seems to give Matt some leeway of like he could put whatever the hell he wants in Davokar, because no one knows what's in there. Like he could come up with whatever idea he likes. But also if he wants to like follow some kind of meta plot or like use characters that are included in the books and things, like there's also a lot of interesting and cool options in that direction as well. I just think it has a nice balance of kind of both parts.
I think I would say as well that like in terms of the setting, the amazing artwork in the rule book like did such a good job of like selling me the setting and like the world of like Symbaroum and Davokar, like and just like not just like the kind of landscapes, but like the way that the people and beasts are drawn within it. Like it's just really evocative and scary, and like really sets the tone beautifully for the whole thing.
It's fantastic. I also think, yes, the person behind all the art for, I think, all of the Free League books is called Martin Gripp. He is amazing. He's some sort of eldritch art being, because he just puts out a huge amount of consistently fantastic art. It's I was going to say one of the things that I really like about Symbaroum of watching you guys is kind of like the sense of not quite disempowerment, but it's the case that you can go into the forest and you can meet a demigod from the dawn of time and bring back priceless artifacts from a long forgotten civilization, and then you can go back to the city and someone in the pub would just be like, I did that. Everyone's done that. What's wrong with you? It's like nothing you do is special, as opposed to D&D, where it starts with you fighting kobolds and then killing a god like 5 sessions later. With Symbaroum, it's just like just a day at the office.
Yeah,
and that's kind of great.
Yeah, there's hundreds, if not thousands, of other adventurers having their own adventure in Symbaroum and Davokar at exactly the same time. So yeah,
especially when we're fighting like alongside Earthons, I'm just like, we're not even good. This guy could do 10 times better.
All the player characters can just retire.
Yeah.
The next theme, the forest.
Yeah,
I have a controversial opinion here in that personally, I find it a bit thus far like weirdly underwhelming, which is odd considering what happened to me.
You did die.
I did die, but like there's just this kind of like everyone's like, oh, the forest, yeah, no, we don't go into there sort of thing. But then it's kind of balancing that out with the fact that obviously your players need to go in there. So for example, there was like so many times when like it'd be like, okay, we need to go into the forest or we need to do this. And Steel would quite rightfully be like, why? And like all of us, like as players, have to be like, well, because we have to, even though actually it makes very little sense. And so like you've got this like one of the like characters is like, no, let's not go in here because it's terrifying and awful and scary, and that's how it should be. And then with like 3 words from the party, like the player's like, yeah, cool, let's go in then. And it's like just like that. It seems like the blanket of like mystery and terror is like somewhat diminished because like in one scene you go from, oh god, no, Davokar's awful, we should not go there ever, yeah, cool, let's go in. And then like kind of once you're in, like, yeah, you do, you know, you meet things, but it just, and it's like through no fault of like anyone's, I just like felt like it was underwhelming once I'd got in there. I don't know why. I think because like again, it's odd because things just attacked us from like the off, but then things attacked us from the off every other day as well. Yeah, the only difference was we knew slightly less about this stuff.
I think it
killed me. So
I agree a lot with you, Ellie, especially, and I think because I was thinking about this when we were putting the questions together. I think one of the problems is like how you compress time in a narrative. You have to compress over the humdrum moments, like the 8 hours walking we did, the just to get to and from the tomb and all this kind of stuff. You have to compress that time away. And there's actually a lot of mechanics in Symbaroum about gathering food, about foraging, about survivalism in the forest that we haven't made great use of. And I
actually had survival as well.
Yeah.
Which is why I didn't take a pack. Like FNA, I had survival so she could find food for the party. But just kind of never ended up using it. Yeah.
Yeah. And I think that's you could run the game a different way to make that more of a useful skill. But on the other hand, like you have to have fast travel in these games. Otherwise it would take us literally 8 weeks to get to the start of the tomb. because we'd have to role play, decompress all that time. I just think that compression does a lot to remove some of the deadliness of Davokar, I think, and I don't. It does certainly feel like at least the parts of Davokar we've seen have been more about event-based entities rather than a level of underlying threat from the forest itself. And I don't know if that's as design. And I think it's more of a, once again, you have to skip time in these games, otherwise you'll be there for literally years. And I think that just kind of does defang the forest a bit.
One thing I would say about the forest is as far as I understand it, we've mostly strayed like not that far from the parts where people just like live in the forest. Maybe the rulebook, perhaps the rulebook is a little bit kind of Ambrian focused when it talks about the forest, because like nearly all the barbarian clans like live in the edge of the forest, in like the bits that we've gone through. But the book does kind of paint it perhaps more harshly than like people couldn't live in. The impression I got from the book was that like people couldn't live in it, but I think it's more like the forest is dangerous, but especially like the deeper you get into the forest, like I think from reading the book, it's like people haven't really returned from the deeper parts of the forest, whereas in the parts we've been to so far, it's like we've kind of gone through barbarian land and then like a tiny bit further and then run out again.
It's worth noting you've been in the parts commonly referred to as light Davokar, so there's definitely more horrors to see further in. But I think Chris's point about fast travel is a very good one, and I can't really comment on it as far as Symbaroum goes, because we fast traveled. We didn't really do that. I mean, I didn't do any of it. I just sat in my room and watched you all. But as a sort of similar system with a similar theme, the One Ring, the Lord of the Rings role-playing game, the survival and the travel roles are the most boring part of that game, as far as I'm concerned. So yeah, I agree.
It does feel like a problem that's very difficult to address in adventuring games.
Well, while we're talking about the forest, does anyone else struggle with like the fact that everything in the rulebook says that Davokar is a forest, but in your head, do you think of it as a jungle? Because like
actually, yeah.
Kind of like
now that you say that,
of like the foliage that is often being described just makes me think jungle more than forest. And some of like the kind of like vivid greens on the maps and stuff like that still kind of reinforce jungle in my head rather than like deciduous forest. But yeah,
it's a Joris.
I know what you mean.
I think at one point we were like buying machetes, and I completely forgot that like we were like in the middle of winter and there was snow starting to fall, and I was just thinking that we're like in Predator or something like that. Yeah.
Someone in chat literally said you're having Predator flashbacks. We've got we need to be getting on with the next point, but we do have an important update from our games master who's lurking in chat.
Like a weirdo creep.
Yeah, Matt. It's that suspension of adventuring disbelief, always an issue with traditional adventuring games. The same as how people in horror movies go to look for whatever made the spooky sound. Because if you didn't, you wouldn't have the story.
Yeah.
But at least in Symbaroum, there's an attempt to address that bafflement. The setting has an economy around said adventuring. People take risks for cold hard cash in a land with limited industry and alternative ways to survive.
Yeah, I agree. Absolutely.
Moving on to our next point. There was a convenient segue earlier, but I completely lost it because of Matt. But colonists, but also refugees. So go for it.
This I wanted to talk to this one. I wrote it down and kept it throughout all the redrafts of this question list, because the setting of Symbaroum really starts off with the kind of protagonist nation, I suppose, Albrator, falling to a mystery, well, not a mystery, but falling to a grim war of dark magic and necromancy, and forcing the entire country to basically emigrate over the mountains and become refugees in this new land, what is eventually called Ambria, where the Ambrians become both colonists and refugees. And I find that it's the one part of this setting that leaves me very uneasy because of just the level of intersections between kind of the concept of colonialism and the concept of who is oppressed and who is being there. Like I said before, there is no good force, because even the nominal good force of the protagonist nation is in itself, like, to survive, to build its capital, had to wipe out one of the barbarian tribes, and has since not done much in terms of reaching further out to any tribe that would not reach back toward them. So I think there's some way to engage, and kind of that's a little bit problematic. I think they're doing that on purpose, and I think they're doing that to make us think about these things. It's just took me off guard a little bit to have to live in this world.
I wish I had a point to, like, something more interesting to say again about that. But I think that point there is almost like wholly Chris's point, because I didn't even contemplate that until Chris brought it up. And then Chris brought it up and I was like, huh, you're right. And that was about as far as my thought process went.
And I think the segue I was that we thought of there is, like, we all think of Davokar as a jungle because of there is a colonial undertone there, and that is, I think, replacing some of our terminology with the more problematic terminology of our history of colonialism. And I think, once again, like, I was on a live stream with the actual writer of Symbaroum and brought some of these points up, and they do agree that they absolutely want us thinking about these interactions and these intersections. And yeah, I definitely think, like, another area in a similar vein is how we've kind of noble savage coded the barbarians to a degree. And I think now we're in the midst of the culture a bit more. I don't think that's as much of an issue, but in the book it feels, and in the interactions we have with kind of rich, I suppose, Ambrians like Godrebalgo in the camp, there's definitely this sense of superiority, this colonial aftertaste.
I think it's really hard to explore some of that stuff with, like, the nuance that it deserves in a roleplay setting. Yeah. Like, I really, like, commend them trying to put in, like, that theme of colonialism, and, like, there's so much that you could do with that. I just feel like to do that sensitively is a really difficult thing to do. Like, it would be a really difficult thing to just write about, let alone sort of perform live in real time. So like, I think that we've steered clear from some of the bigger things there, although it's obviously kind of still, we're, kind of, taking natural resources that, in a place that's not our own. So, we're still dealing with that sort of stuff, I guess.
Yeah. I think there's even, like, I do think it's something that would be very hard to deal with completely, like, properly. And I think even beyond what you've already mentioned, like, there's even more layers to it of, like, the clans that are called barbarians. Even they are kind of infringing on what the elves see as their own home.
Yeah.
And I mean, even the fact that they're called barbarians by the Ambrians, and, like, there's, like, a bunch of different tribes that like or dislike each other and are pretty different. Like, there's so many layers to it. I think it does give some good options for a GM in terms of, like, you could try and tell some interesting stories with the setting, but I mean, it would be very difficult to do live. And but
it almost feels like the setting they have taken some of the efforts to polish out some of the mechanical issues and put maybe that effort times 5 into making the setting just really dense and deep and filled with intersections that a GM could explore. Whereas I think other role-playing games kind of just give you a blank page and a set of mechanics and don't really inform you on what kind of stories you should be telling with those mechanics.
Yeah.
Well, that was deep.
Mm. That was juicy. I liked it. Let's
Meaty.
I mean, yeah,
move
obviously
on.
big fan of the system overall. It's definitely quite different.
Let's move on to talking about characters. It's our little piece of the setting, our little corner. Deep question, starting off with, have we made a mark on the world, or has the world changed us?
Definitely
I'm
the latter.
dead.
You may. We don't know that for certain.
Someone click that.
I made quite a literal mark on the world with my blood.
Yeah,
Probably.
quite a squishy one.
But no, in all seriousness, definitely the latter. Our characters are just doing, as we've said before, what every other character who needs to make money and who is equipped enough to do it is doing. We're not changing anything. Not yet, anyway. There may have been times where our actions may have, stopped a greater calamity, but I wouldn't necessarily call that leaving a mark on the world. So, I mean, I know for FNA, for example, definitely, she became less inherently racist for meeting Ascarai and becoming friends with him, and also learned to ignore all Bard's smooth talking words forever.
Did she learn that in the end? I think she was almost
she was
there.
getting
She
there.
didn't
She was
quite-
getting there.
Yeah.
But yeah, I'd say that the world changed us as characters rather than us having any impact on it, because we're just tiny little beings.
I did also very much enjoy watching. I mean, it's now happening to Anton, but I did very much enjoy watching FNA's slow slide into corruption. Thanks to Nightblade.
Black Gift.
Yeah.
Black Gift. Yeah, that funnily enough, it was, yeah, because obviously we had that, she had Black Gift to use, but I very rarely would use, because the thing is, she was quite overpowered anyway. I would very rarely use the mechanic that gave me the corruption, and
which was good, really.
Yes, indeed. But yeah, oh man, I've completely lost my train of thought, basically, because there's a BB-8 over here that's normally stationary and it's suddenly started moving. So I'm a bit distracted by that.
Okay, moving on from Elle's haunted droid, Stio. Chris, do you think Stio has been changed or changed the world?
Yeah, I feel like there's obviously multiple layers to that, because I'd originally built Stio as a character I could play on autopilot and not really engage too much with, just because it's been 20 years, so I didn't want to drive myself off the deep end. So I think I've laid aside a lot of the trauma I'm supposed to be giving Stio for the sake of the opportunity for some goodish one-liners and for kind of being more of a definitely more of a person of agency in the group. I also think I feel like we are leaving changes on the world, and again, I think it goes back to the sheen of enigma around Davokar and around the Symbaric civilization is that we've raided 3 tombs now, and we have, on our person a number of these artifacts. And we already know that a number of these artifacts are profoundly, horrifyingly powerful and destructive. So I feel like what I'm getting at is I think Symbaroum is a game about consequences, and I think like our changes on the world will bring about consequences. I don't think we can walk around taking stuff and selling it like it's some kind of rogue trader game. I feel like at some points there's going to be a copper crown with our name on it or something like that.
Yeah, I mean, the thing is, even the times where we've like kind of succeeded or like vaguely finished some kind of quest line which we were intending to be for, improving the world maybe slightly and for our own health and safety, it never quite has worked out in a way that was actually good, like ever. Like we had the whole thing with like the copper crown, and we finally found the flayer, but then Odako like runs off with the crown, and it's like, did we win? Like, I don't know. And then we go to investigate like what's happened to the Auto Magica. We arrive, they're all dead. We like vaguely help in some way, but Ephonea dies, and only 2 of the Auto Magica are left alive. One of whom.
Yeah, did we actually achieve anything that day?
Yeah, I think that's
it's just like even when you're trying your best to change the world in some small way that Symbaroum might allow you to, which is still less than other systems, it still is like questionable. I definitely think the changes are more to our group, to our party, like the things we've gone through, and like getting maybe closer together as a party and progressing slightly in terms of our experience and equipment and understanding of the world is the greater change. But I do agree, it's more like, I don't know if we're intentionally changing the world in a way that we would choose so much as we're doing things and consequences. There are consequences, as Chris said, not always what we would intend, but like something. Something's happened.
Yeah, absolutely. I certainly feel like there's definitely consequences. I don't think we are the agents of those consequences to a great deal because we don't have the information. We don't know the system. We don't cheer when a dragon walks in the room. We don't have like the full background of this. We are subject to the setting, not the masters of it.
I also think, like, as Held mentioned earlier, like there's also a part of kind of the fact that I feel like to a certain extent our characters, in the way that we'd envisioned them, probably would not have taken some of the risks that we've ended up taking. And so kind of from a system point of view and like a natural role-playing point of view, our characters probably changed to be slightly more daring, maybe even slightly more greedy. And like, as Matt said, part of the motivation for doing any of this stuff ever is that you want to get stuff out of Symbaroum.
Yeah.
Whereas I feel like perhaps we wouldn't have imagined our characters as being like especially motivated by wanting stuff from tombs. But then the setting almost doesn't make sense if they're not going to be motivated by that. So you kind of, I feel like at least with Askarai, I've kind of had to reimagine that aspect of him a bit as being someone who does want stuff out of tombs, because otherwise, like, he just wouldn't do this stuff. Like, he'd just stay safer and not take the huge risks that we've taken and with us, some of these tombs we've gone in.
And I think part of this, I wonder, is it deliberate that part of it seems to be Davokar feels like it is a creature, and that it is a creature that traps its prey, that lures them in and says, look, like Davokar's easy, one more tomb. Specifically, the adventure we're just about to wrap up, wrapping up next week, was literally just, one more tomb. We've raided 2 tombs. The third one's going to be easy. And I think I wonder how deliberate it is to make Davokar be as difficult, be easy when it wants to be easy, but then brutal when something is at stake, or when it has you in its clasp. Really, it does a great job to bring out the kind of the greedy gamer in us. I think one more magic item will just secure our winnings here.
I think the moment when we came across like the Karahar warriors who said, if you go past, we'll kill you rather than let you out. I think that was a great illustration of exactly what I'm talking about. Like, Askrai, as I'd imagined him, would have been like, fine, I won't go in there. We've already got a bunch of stuff. I'll just go home. But that doesn't really. You're not playing the game if you do that. So you kind of have to reimagine your character as someone who would
a
be
little
like,
bit, yeah.
I've got I really want what might be in this tomb, so I better go past, and like take.
But on the other hand, I think like all of our characters will have seen people come back from Davokar and go from rags to riches. So it's essentially a gamble. It's a gambling game at its core. You go in here not knowing, not being able to understand what you're going in for, and you might come out never having to work another day in your life.
I think that's something that really, I don't think any of us have really explored that much, is like, that kind of like refugee element, like we're coming from nothing really, like we're trying to make new lives for ourselves, and like that is the driver, isn't it? That's what sends people into Davokar, like the prospect of getting insanely wealthy, and like after coming from desolation or having nothing to have everything. Sounds pretty appealing, but in our story we haven't seen all of our characters' backstories, so it's a little bit sort of harder for us to weave that sort of stuff in. And I think also like we sort of got glimpses of this at the start, but like Thistlehold, I think is really not that nice of a place, and like like if the safe place is not that nice, then the idea of kind of getting fabulously wealthy from treasure hunting is a bit more appealing, I guess.
I think that's a good point. Like, maybe our characters would have always been this kind of motivated by the money of Symbaroum, if or speaking for myself, like maybe Askrai, he would have been as kind of, I guess, greedy or ambitious as he's ended up having to be, if I had thought more about his life and like the struggle he would have to go through without doing this, like how horrible his life would be if he didn't somehow strike it big in Symbaroum. Perhaps if I'd thought more about that, I would have initially thought of him as more of a kind of treasure hungry adventurer.
All right. Moving on to our last point for the evening then.
Heck.
What does Symbaroum mean for each player? And as a follow-up, what moments that you've had has been most Symbaroum-y? Symbaroumic?
Symbaric?
Symbaric? Singular. It's singular. It's completely singular. I just checked in the book.
It's like tubular, but not.
Yeah.
I feel like for me, it was probably when we were at the Tomb of Dying Dreams, or rather before we went in there, and like we had met Zanatha, and there was some of the horrible blight thing in the area, and like you're caught between all these like powerful, maybe malevolent forces that you don't understand, that you're not really equipped to deal with. And like I really felt there that like that was like I felt like Anton was like way out of his depth and pretty terrified. So like that felt like a real Symbaric moment for me.
I think for me, I can't quite. What was the like original question? Because I've got a Symbaric moment, but what was the original?
What does Symbaroum mean for you?
Yeah. So I am going to kind of take it back to what Chris said a little earlier. And sorry, one moment.
Oh no, we've got an invader.
We do have an invader.
Let's move on to Sam.
I think for me, Symbaroum it's about like the struggle. It feels like that is what separates it from other systems. Like you are really just struggling. You're struggling to survive. You're struggling to succeed or to have any impact. I mean, like I said, every time we've tried to do something good, arguably failed miserably, arguably like barely succeeded. I think like that. I've had a couple of moments which really encapsulate that. I think one would be outside like Jackett's Heart when I shot an arrow at like the witch guy. I just used my poison arrow because I was like, this is important. I need to try and kill this guy. And then that just has the horrible unintended consequence of killing a bunch of
wiping out
mostly
goblin
innocent
tribe,
goblins. And it's like, I'm just doing my best. I'm trying to succeed. But like there are real kind of real world consequences, and it just ends up kind of screwing things up. Not more, but it's like even try my best. It's been questionable how well I've done. And similar with Ephonea drinking the thing, and I was like, I'll shoot this, and that'll stop Ephonea from having horrible consequences. And then it just shatters and goes all over her. I'm like, did I do good? Like, I don't know. I tried.
You
Are
did
we
something
the baddies?
cool. Was it
Like,
the right cool thing?
I'm doing my best. I'm really trying hard, but like, things don't always go to plan, and it's always more of a struggle. It's never quite as simple or as easy as it might seem.
It's funny because, like, conversely to that, going back to what I was saying was, I'm going to take it back to what Chris was saying, and basically, for me, Symbaroum means gambling, like Chris said, and like Sam was just saying, it's like, do I do this thing? Will it pay off? Will it fuck it? Who knows? And for me, like, that moment was because a lot of Symbaroum for me has just been adapting to whatever shit gets thrown at you. And to me, nothing encapsulates that more than in our first storyline in Jackett's Heart, when Ephonea one-shot the big bad.
Yeah.
And like, to me, that was like the most Symbaroum moment, because for my character personally, because it was unexpected. And that's, to me, that's what Symbaroum is. It's like, it's dealing with shit that gets thrown your way. In this case, Matt had to deal with the shit that I threw his way. Quite expertly, obviously. But like, it was kind of like, it was a gamble, because in that moment, Ephonea like just went, sod it, I'm gonna just try and take on the big bad one-on-one. Let's see how this goes, lads. And then just killed her, and it worked, and it was great. And that's the thing, like, Symbaroum is a gamble, and when it pays off, it's like a Dark Souls game. You're like, yes, I achieved this thing. Holy shit. So yeah, that's my kind of, to me, Symbaroum is a gamble, and it's the highs of the gamble paying off versus the lows of being trapped in the tomb of dying dreams forevermore, where you're crushed under the weight of stone slabs.
But it's fine. Steo can dig really hard and save you.
Yes.
Oh wait.
No, it's fine. No, he's going to save his wife.
Yeah,
In the
because
tunnels.
apparently Ephonea means nothing to me. No, but I don't really. I can't really think of an example of a thing I did that kind of encapsulates the game all that much. But I can. I mean, what Symbaroum kind of means to me is, I kind of glanced across it earlier. It's that we understand the dangers of the forest, and we understand how knowing all of the stuff that is mysterious to us is not going to make us happier. It's certainly not going to make us healthier or wealthier. But yet I'm still, as a player, and I think as a character as well, driven towards learning more about this environment. maybe obviously for different reasons, but it's just the intricacy of the setting and the wheels that turn when you pull on these kind of narrative levers. It's a beautiful machine, and the forest is a beautiful machinery of mystery and enigma and eldritch horror, but eldritch delight as well. And I think that for me, that's what the system, that's what this series of stories has been like.
Basically, the story of things getting worse, session by session.
That's kind of real life, though, and in the main.
Bonus question that wasn't a part of our prearranged agenda.
Oh, God.
If you had to sell Symbaroum to someone in like 1 or 2 sentences, how would you describe it? How would you sum it up?
Ooh.
Difficult.
I would, if I was, I'd be like, hey, you should play Symbaroum. It's brutal, dark, fantasy, atmospheric horror, and you don't have to roll that many dice.
That's a good one.
That actually nailed it.
I'd kind of be like, do you like the idea of legitimately spooky D&D with less baggage? Boy, have I got the game system for you. And it also uses D20, so you don't even have to buy any new dice.
Yeah, I think I'd just kind of frame it as a like more serious, more interesting fantasy setting than
that's a good point.
Almost anything else that you'd find in anywhere. And with a nice, pretty streamlined system to go with it that keeps things fun and quite smooth and entertaining to play.
I think I'd say, well, you know that Vampire the Masquerade series that's on Telling Tales? Well, it's even better than that.
Oh my God, the shill.
Shots have been fired. How dare you slander that Vampire the Masquerade 5th edition stream that airs
didn't say
at
it
8
was
o'clock
bad.
GMT on Tuesdays on Telling Tales Twitch.
I said it was even better. That doesn't mean that it was bad.
I mean, you could also to take it back to how would you describe Symbaroum, you could go for the kind of comedic, kind of like, hey, do you want to play a role-playing game that will definitely dissuade the kind of people that go, can I roll stamina during sex? Then Symbaroum is the game for you.
It does
I mean,
feel
like legitimately that was
salient
one of
and
the,
valid point.
it was one of the one of the thing when I first started role playing was I was doing it in, I almost said tavern, in a pub, on like an organized night where you did that sort of thing, and like, don't get me wrong, I like
evolve into L's RPG horror stories, isn't it?
no, so I like levity, but if you know, I don't want to be involved in a game where people like, fine, flirt with Blackhawk, but I don't want to get involved in a role play where people are like, snarf snarf, can I roll to have sex? You know,
the mechanics are separated from the story, I think.
It's I'd you know, if you're wanting a if you're wanting a role play experience that is more serious than D&D, go Symbaroum.
Go Symbaroum.
Go Symbaroum.
More serious, less baggage.
All right. I think we can leave it on that. Thank you, everyone, for showing up and voicing your opinions. Before we go, would anyone in chat like to raise any comments or questions or anything you think we've missed, anything you think we very strongly disagree with? While you're all busy typing out all that sweet, sweet engagement for us, I'll run through our closing promo a little bit.
He's so good. Why do we even have Matt?
I don't know. Honestly, who knows? Symbaroum, 8 o'clock GMT Wednesdays, here on Twitch. Elle needs to leave. Goodbye, Elle.
Adios. It has been good. I'll see you never. Because I'm dead.
Oh God! Hell,
Goodbye.
why?
Goodbye.
Oh my God. Now I feel it. Now I'm sad.
8 o'clock GMT Wednesdays, Simbroom. 8 o'clock GMT Tuesdays, Vampire the Masquerade 5th edition, London Ascendant / Fall of London. 8 o'clock GMT Mondays, Call of Cthulhu, brand new series, get in on the ground floor. First Saturday of every month, one-shot RPGs, currently on YouTube, Troika Alien RPG, April the 3rd, 3 o'clock GMT, Morkborg. And I'm not going to do it in the metal voice because I've got a head mic and it will probably make a horrible feedback noise. Social media, Twitter, Facebook, Instagram, YouTube, Twitch, Discord. Tell us your opinions on things. That's it. That's pretty much the promo.
So
Great job, John.
I think the only audience engagement we've got is this self-agendizing number. This is what we have to put up with, viewers.
I'm really loath to sing Matt's praises and make his head swell even further. But I will say this, that I think that we talked about the sort of mechanics matching the setting, but I think also it really matches Matt's sort of style of GMing and the stories that he wants to tell. So it's a nice marriage of all three of those things, really. And Matt's all right here, I suppose. Yeah, it's passable.
Yeah, no, all credit to the man. He's very good with telling tales.
Appropriately.
Nice, very nice. Yeah, I think as Mike says, the system fits Matt really well, and Matt does a great job of, basically every part of it, like the story and running things smoothly, keeping us on track, and balancing it out nicely between the combat and the story.
I also want to give a bit of a shout out at Matt because as I think I said at the beginning, Simbroom was the first series that we ran for Telling Tales, and Matt has adapted his role-playing, his GMing style to a stream sort of setup amazingly well, which, having hosted this, and it's not even role-playing, I can just say I have newfound respect for constantly talking at a camera for 2 hours and just engaging with people. No. The man's genius.
Never again. Great.
As long as
All
Matt
right.
never sees or listens to any of this, we're fine.
I'm sure he hasn't been watching
Listening
and
to all of it
commenting.
and commenting in the chat. Anyway,
good night, everyone. Thank you for joining us. We hope we will see you again.
Bye-bye.
Good night.